for joining us on another wonderful My Tuesday night. While we wait for more people to join in, please take a moment to use the Zoom chat box and share something about yourself, like where you're located, if you're a parent, a student in high school, or if you're a professional in the industry. Also, feel free to perhaps ask any questions before the interview begins to myself or George, and we'll be happy to answer it. Okay, we have someone calling in from California. I'm also located in California. George, where are you located?
West Chicago, Illinois.
Chicago, yeah.
I like that box. Somebody's saying, George, you look really good. Must be my #1 fan.
We have Jonathan from Virginia. He from Jacksonville.
Yeah, I spent 6 years in Virginia, part-time.
I really like your pin. Where's that pin from?
Oh, I wear this just for you.
Just for me.
And this audience is my White House initiative pin. Since we're talking about government job, I don't normally wear it. Yeah. What's interesting about this pin is you figure you work with a White House unit, you get a pin by automatically.
Yeah.
No, because
you join.
But no, in our case, they don't want to spend taxpayer dollar to make a pin for George. So George had to pay $7 for it.
Wow.
That's like working for the government, a lot of regulations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have to, the group coordinator order some pins. And then because the government do not want to pay for things like that.
Yeah, they're got to save the taxpayer money, you know?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Except we spent $2 billion on one jet plane, but that's okay. This priorities. George's pin is not a high priority. Yeah.
So we'll be starting soon, but for those who are already here, feel free to share any information about yourself. If you have any questions before we start, if you're in university, a parent, just let's get to know one another.
Jacksonville, Florida. I was just in Tampa.
What is MyT?
There you go.
George, you can explain it if you'd like.
MyT.Coach is a coaching platform that I'm part of. I'm a proud member of, one of the coaches. In fact, I just sent the link, and you could simply go to www.it.coach. And it's a free membership. You could join, and then with that, you could see. In fact, I have 10 articles in there you could read, and there's other coaches with articles, so you could read that. Those are resources that's free. So you could take a look at it, and obviously you could ask a question along the way here with me, Leo, and Kathy on the call here.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. All right, well, we have a lot of people in here now, so let's begin. Before we start, I'd like to thank MyT.Coach, AFI, and Dragonfly TV for hosting tonight's event. Today's conversation is going to be an interesting, non-traditional topic, to say the least. Me and George will be talking about having a career in the U.S. federal government. So as we go along, feel free to share your questions in the chat box as we go, and we will do our best to bring most of them up when they fit into the flow of our interview. We hope we can get to most of them during our session, and we will also have Q&A time at the end for those that we were unable to get to. Our special guest tonight is George Mui, a former U.S. Department of Commerce and White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Many of you already know George as the king of networking, as he can connect you with almost anyone. George has inspired many Asian Americans and has mentored and coached countless professionals in the industry. I met George over 10 years ago at Barack Obama's second inauguration ceremony, and I was fascinated by his ideas from our first conversation. What makes George so interesting to me is his unique career path, as well as his wide range of skills and experiences. George has had great success in the private and public sector, and I'm really glad that he could join us today for our interview. That being said, let's begin. Welcome, George. Would you mind please providing a brief description of your overall career?
Thank you, Leo, and thank you, MyT.Coach, and all the sponsors for inviting me to join this conversation. It's one of my favorite topics after spending 12 years in the U.S. federal government. Yeah, so my career is a long one so far, and looking to do a few more things. I have spent 20 years as an engineer to product marketing director at AT&T Bell Labs Lucent Technology. Took early retirement 20 years ago, and then started my own consulting business 5-6 years. And then I joined a nonprofit doing what we call small business advocacy and with the Small Business Administration to help small business with startup and actually gain access to finance. That actually led me to Department of Commerce with the Minority Business Development Agency. And my specialty is international business development. So I'm a business coach, and we help minority business with international business, but also work helping people understand how to get financing and contracts. And it takes me around the country, in fact, around the world, with 2 free trade missions to China, 1 to the Philippines. So that's a wonderful experience. And then for the last 5 years of my Department of Commerce, I also had a special assignment to the White House Initiative, where I had a chance to work with, again, Asian American business owners to help them with their business challenges. Basically, I learned how to use all the resources available in the federal government, and especially come to international business. Asian American is second to none to help, especially doing business in Asia. In fact, I developed a strategy called leveraging the diaspora community to expand export, and leveraging Asian American to business in Asia for Americans is really novel, but a very simple ideas. So I really enjoyed my 12 years in Department of Commerce and my young years. So I'm excited to talk about working for the U.S. government today.
Yeah, you really have a really diverse background, right? The engineering, entrepreneurship, consulting, working for the government. It's really amazing and impressive.
Yeah, I said I always tell people I'm not the smartest kid. I'm not highest ranking officials, but I actually had a chance. I felt like I maximized my career potential by being able to handle the different challenges along the way. So I'm actually sharing that. I know a lot of the folks here have attended my my classes already. Kathy and I, we did about 8 of them already. I always talk about these stories, and what I try to tell people is, hear my story, internalize it, and take action to do the same. Maximize your career potential.
Yeah. So that being said, how long was your U.S. federal government career, and what are some major goals that you accomplished during that time?
Yeah, I had as I mentioned earlier, it's sort of toward the tail end of my career. I wanted to retire 59. I didn't retire until I'm 67, I believe. But the last 12 years of my career, I retired in 2019 from the federal government and started my own consulting firm and do a lot of different projects. One of the projects is this, obviously, with MyT.Coach. But I wanted to leverage my skill set, which is helping small business in the bigger context, right? It's no bigger than the U.S. Department of Commerce. And I also want to focus on helping minority business, especially Asian American business. Unfortunately, Asian American, are always looked to as a model minority, but they suffer a lot of challenges in getting access to federal government. So that's one of my goals, is make sure while in Department of Commerce, I want to make sure all minority business have access to all these resources, especially the Asian American. With that, I actually find my way into the White House Initiative, which is a special unit under Obama that allows for government employees to focus on just the Asian American, helping them with a whole spectrum of getting access to the government. I narrowly focus on the business side. So that's why they say White House Initiative on Asian American Pacific Islanders. Now they have extended to Native Hawaiian. I focus on just business development. With that, we're able to accomplish quite a few things. Having trade missions, using Asian American as the anchor. We actually led a presidential delegation to the Philippines, mostly Asian Americans, which is the first, unfortunately, the only one that's done in the history of APAC, which is the summit. But there are things that happens for a reason, and one of my reasons is be able to access the U.S. government resources to help Asian American, which is, I feel like I have done that quite a bit. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's really wonderful that you helped so many Asian Americans and giving our next generation more opportunities in starting their own businesses, right?
Yes, and actually, it's a wonderful thing in terms of U.S. government resources. There's like 21 agencies who's there to help you with some type of businesses. Unfortunately, Asian Americans tend not to know about it, and when they try to go get help, they don't get the help they need. So this is something that we have to continue to work on both sides. One is Asian American knowing these resources, and they should go ask for help, right? And actually, on the other side, we need to get enough people like me with the same kind of focus on the government side to help the Asian Americans.
Yeah. That being said, how did you first land a job in government service?
Yeah, I took a very unique path, which it took me 9 months to land the job. I entered with the thought of working on what I want to work on as a contractor, because I was independent consultant. So I presented that concept to very similar concept that we talked about, which is leverage Asian American to do international business in Asia. That's one. The second thing is I recognize that a lot of government employees really don't have the technology background to help technology companies. And number three is really one of the major reasons why I really was excited about joining is Asian Americans don't have access to federal government resources the way I see it. So those are three things that I was presented to the director in Chicago of the Minority Development Agency. Unfortunately, they don't hire a contractor like that. So, but he politely said, "Thank you, have another drink." We were having dinner. And then 9 months later, he called me and said, "Hey, one of our employees left and we have an opening. I like what you say, so I'm going to present a job in similar fashion, but you have to compete for it." So I have to compete for it, which is also a challenge for us who are not in the government to compete for a job, even though it's somewhat designed in a way is a good match for me. But working through the process, I was able to get in, and we could talk a little bit about the process later as we discussed, and then see how other people could leverage similar approach and method to gain access to a job they want in the government. Yeah,
so it sounds like there's different ways to join the U.S. government. And with yours, it's a unique case because you created the position by showing the value and engaging that.
Well, how is that? They create a position by listening to what I present, but I didn't create a position. So I wish I could create a position. Yeah, I know what you mean.
But that being said, what are some challenges that you faced while entering the U.S. federal government service? And
well, as you need, first of all, first there's a lot of regulation behind, and actually for the right reason. One is you have to be a U.S. citizen. Second, you have to pass security check at various levels. You can't have a criminal record, obviously. I came out clean. I was able to join. The challenges for people like me at the time, which is just a regular people off the street, we have to compete with two other group of people that has higher priority. One is the veteran, people who have served in armed forces. And you have to understand, and I agree with that philosophy, if people who serve the country, potentially die for the country, they should have a chance to get a job. I myself was almost drafted, so I almost went into the armed forces back in the day. But the second one is they always give federal employee a shot at jobs they want, lateral or promotion. Mm-hmm. So the job I applied for, which is the highest level non-management, GS13. For people on listening, you can actually look at all the job criteria, all the job openings in USA Jobs, and OPM, Office of Personnel Management, lay out all the job classes. There's no secret how much people get paid each one and what benefits are. So it's difficult for someone to compete in this setting, which is a job a lot of people want, the highest level of non-management. Yeah. Obviously, people want to compete for management, but that's another story, right? So there's every job opening, there's hundreds. I know in my case, I went through a opening selection process. There's like 400 people apply for a job that's similar to me. And I have to help sort out the 400 people. So it's not the easiest thing to do, but you know, like I always tell people, you need one job. If the right approach, you go get it.
Yeah. So. I mean, it sounds like it's even more competitive than finding a job in the professional industries.
Yeah, well, there's a lot more options, less regulations. Mm-hmm. The quick thing about finding a job, even in the government, and a lot of my students are here. It's about networking, about knowing the people on the other side. No one's going to give you a job because you're Asian, because you're a college graduate. There's tons of it. I would say there's in my job there would be like 180 people. Wild guess. They're more qualified than me, but somehow I got in a way where it's meaningful, which I know people there. And I compete well with the other candidates, and I got selected. It took 9 months to do it, so it wasn't easy. Yeah, but long process. Yeah, it's a long process. But the regulations there to protect the integrity of the system. You just have to know what that system is and figure out how you get to it. Private sector tend to be a little more flexible, right? Uncle Joe could call up somebody and say, "Hey, you know, get George in here. He's a good kid." Right, then you get in. Now, let's just say AT&T Bell Labs, which I got in, right? Okay, I go into IIT, a great school. A lot of Bell Laboratory folks is from IIT. So when they see a resume from IIT, they say, "Oh, this is a good school. Let's look at it." Right? I got good grades, so I got in. Not so difficult, but with the same resume, same time frame, I would not have gotten into U.S. government. But it's just that I don't want to discourage anyone, but it's just the reality of what you have to know, who you have to know, and how you go about getting in the U.S. government.
Yeah,
still the same challenges. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you said, it's not as flexible as the private sector, right? So what types of jobs are available in your field of the federal government?
You name it, they have it. Right? Imagine the U.S. government. Mm-hmm. Everything you need in the private sector, you need in the federal government. We need IT people. In fact, a lot of Asian Americans trying to get into IT sector. Yeah. And in fact, quite a few get in because they're their specialty. And I always said, Asian American in IT, take a look at the job in IT in the federal government. I mean, it's endless. Yeah. But on the other side of it, lawyers get in, right? I know a lot of Asian American lawyers actually in the federal government. If anything, lawyers, there's more lawyers in the government than anybody, than engineers, right? So, and scientists, look at Dr. Welch, right? So there's anything you can imagine, there's a job for it in the federal government. And I think the last check, there's like almost 1 million people across the world that work for the U.S. government, right? So it's the biggest employer in the United States.
Yeah.
Right. So the job is unlimited. And for people on the call, take a look at usajob.gov. And then you could kind of Google any topic that you think you fit. And more than likely, there'll be a job that meets your interest or your background. Now, getting in another story, right? Getting in another story, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so once you get in, how are the salary and benefits of working for the federal government?
The salary is not as high as private sector, to be honest. And I know when I was in the private sector, I certainly make more money than I was in the federal government. But the benefit is great. And in fact, one of the major reasons I stay that long is the benefits. Because after, oh, there you go. Great job. So after, and the benefits are listed, obviously, online. Everything's listed online from the U.S. federal government. And the one benefit that I think is most impressive is that when I retired from Lucent Technology, I was a healthcare. The first year was $125 a year. Next year was $500. The year after that was $1,000, right? Because it's private sector. Federal government, I'm still paying the same amount of healthcare as I was as a federal employee. All you have to do is be there for 5 years. And most people say that the federal government job is the most steady job there is, because government can print money, so they don't generally lay off people.
Yeah.
They do restructure once in a while, and then they move you around, and then you might have to relocate. Hopefully not to Alaska, unless you want to go to Alaska, or Hawaii, right? Well, Hawaii jobs, and well, there's like EPA has jobs in Hawaii, but guess what? I bet you 1,000 people apply for that job. So yeah. The most job obviously is in Washington. And the thing about the government job, if you work for the government, if you leave the government, there's actually a lot more potential employers who are looking for your expertise, which is the contractors, right? So there's a ecosystem. If you go to Washington, Virginia, and Maryland, you will see the ecosystem of federal government employee, contractor who sell to the U.S. government, and also people who sell to the contractor. So everything is dependent on the U.S. government around there. So
yeah. Yeah. So you talked about how it's very steady, right, and easygoing. So is there a lot of mobility though working for the federal government? Are there a lot of promotion opportunities?
Mobility as in getting promoted to next classification. This is a pretty, if you look at online, you can see this, like a typical college student come in at GS 8 or 9. So promotion happened for that particular employee to 10, 11, 12, and 13. That is almost systematic. And you might have to apply for a job in different categories. So that happens. This mobility is there. The challenge always is, just like in the corporate private sector, is getting to management rank. Mm-hmm. GS 14 will be a supervisor level, and GS 15 will be like director level. And then there will be what they call SCS, which is the executive level, mm-hmm. which is like the vice president.
Yeah.
So mobility, unfortunately, especially Asian Americans and minorities, through the management rank is tougher than private sector.
Yeah.
So you could say, yeah, there's a mobility. And by the way, one thing I love about the federal government potential is really relocation, different part of the country and different part of the world. If you work for the State Department, you actually, or Department of Commerce, you can actually become a commercial officer to travel around the world and work like 3 years in different cities. And one of my
the government covers all the relocation.
Yeah, because you're working on behalf of the U.S. government. For example, one of the job I was talking for is a commercial officer for Department of Commerce in Hong Kong. And I actually applied for that job, tried to apply for the commercial office job, but because I was at the tail end of my career, that they do have a requirement have to be 59 and a half or younger. So it didn't quite work out so well for me, but yeah.
So you talked about 59 or younger, right? So
yeah,
how does
that's like a job because you have to travel.
Big job. Yeah.
But for other job, there's no age requirement.
Yeah.
I mean, I retired at 66, but I could retire at 75 in my job if I want to. Yeah.
Yeah,
so in fact, the every age of the federal government employee is getting older and older because they don't kick you out. The private sector generally find a way to kick you out when you get old. That's the reality of it. Federal government, they do well with some experience, so they don't systematically try to move you out. And a lot of them actually stay because they're good at their job, and they figure out the system. They really don't have to hustle as much, you know. And in fact, that's part of the challenge for younger people try to get in. People don't retire fast enough. Yeah.
So there's less age restriction than in the public sector, but still, how does one enter U.S. government services at a late stage in their career?
Yeah, there's two ways to do it. Actually, there's what I was talking about is really what we call the career level government employee, right? So that will be the USJob.gov. And as you know, each administration appoint executive into the administration. So a lot of people who are outside of the government get appointed in the position. And if you look at Washington, there's a lot of folks whose careers make up appointments. And the path for that is really you generally have to associate yourself with, actually, I would call the winning party, right? For example, right now is the Democrats. And before that was the Republican. And they generally appoint only the people in their party with some minor exception, technical expertise needed, right? Mm-hmm. So I know there's only one secretary that was both on the Democrat and Republican administration. So it's very rare. So for folks who are later part of their career, generally what they want to do, if they want to aspire into U.S. government services, two ways. One is to take my route, being I was a business expert, right? For example, somebody might be some other expert. Look for a job that requires the technical expertise, right? With the experience you have, and you have a better shot at getting in. Especially, and I think you and I were talking about it, in today's environment, technology, newer technology, those people are much needed, right? And topic I often talk about is like cybersecurity. If you're expert in cybersecurity, Homeland Security might want you. Yeah. They can't promote somebody into it because they don't have the expertise. Mm-hmm. Right? And this is actually where Asian American shines because there's a lot of science, technology, folk background. So if you're one of those folks, you might want to find your way into jobs that has very special expertise. I know there's a lot of PhD around. In fact, there's probably at least out of 106 people, there's 25 PhD in there, right? If you have that level of technical competency and you're interested in federal government, you might want to search for USA job. What's a critical job opening that might be, and don't try to get into the reality. Don't try to get a management job. Yeah. In management, they don't need the technical expertise, right? It's a technical job, and you're happy with it. I was very happy doing my technical job, which is business consultant, at the non-management level. In fact, I enjoy it more. In fact, I actually turned down a potential promotion because I don't want to be management, right? Because now you're just pushing paperwork, which is no fun, at least for me in my career. Now, back in the losing day, I was chasing the VP jobs, right? So that's a different phase of my career. But in my phase of my career, I really enjoy doing things to help people. So there's a multiple paths you could do, even for folks at later part of their career. Now, getting appointed is another story. Getting appointed, for example, they will appoint somebody in the health sector into assistant secretary, health and human services. Now, those folks have the technical expertise, but they also have either contributed or part of the party that has a sort of like on the list, right, to be appointed. So you can't just say on one day, oh, I want to join the U.S. government, I want to be appointed. It doesn't work that way. You have to kind of work your way into the system, know the right people, so that when there's an appointment come, you'll be on the list.
Yeah. So to summarize, there's two main ways, right, that you'd explained. First is off merit. If you have technical expertise in a certain area, you can apply and the government will.
That's the career track. We call that the career employees. The second one is the appointed political track. Yeah. Right. You get in, but think about this though. If you get in as career, once you get in, you're in. You get in as political every 4 years or so, sometimes even quicker, because there's other people waiting in line. You're in, then you're out, right? And when the other party takes over, you're out. You can come back in again when your party wins, right? It's very political.
We actually have some questions in the chat regarding that. We have a question that asks, is there a route for foreigners to find a U.S. government job?
Only a special case. You do have to be a U.S. government employee to get in the career track. And I know there's some exceptions if there are a particular technical expertise they need. But granted, you know, unless you are a U.S. citizen, generally the answer is generally no.
Generally no.
Yeah. In fact, they have that requirement when you apply for the job.
We also have another question from Philip. He asks if the U.S. federal government has target universities when they search for new employees.
I don't think so. I don't know of. I know of programs the U.S. government have that college student can apply for. So that would be another path. It's sort of like a fellowship, you know, a special program to get in. When you graduate, you go in at GS7. The challenge with that, you don't really have to apply based on merit. Somehow you apply for it, and then the promotion is very slow, right? So and it's very difficult to switch. But for college, they don't go to like Stanford or UCLA to say, we're just going to go to UCLA. Unlike like Amazon, or they could free to do whatever they want to do. Like depending who the recruiter want. Hey, we're going to go UCLA, USC, and then we go to University of Maryland. But that's not good in the federal government, because federal government's code is open to all, right? Yeah. They can just go pick unless they very special reason. Yeah. Hopefully that answered that question.
So it sounds like it's not about the specific college, but whoever fits the job requirements, right? So the college students have to take the initiative.
Yeah, and the federal government don't have a whole lot of budget to go recruiting per se. Yeah. You know, like a corporation. I remember I flew to Howard University on the company's dime to talk to 4 students because we want to recruit minority students. But government don't do stuff like that, right? Private sector do stuff like that. You remember what I talked about the PIN? When they don't want you to do something, they always tell you you're using taxpayers' dollar.
Taxpayer money.
Right? So sometimes you ask the question, why using my taxpayer dollars to do this? But seems like as an employee, every time I ask for something, they say, well, using taxpayers' dollars, you can't do that.
So we have a question in the chat about that. Are there any opportunities for perhaps college students who are learning abroad?
What do you mean we're learning abroad? So
abroad, like not in the US.
Yeah, I know for college students, in fact, you and I talk about it. And in fact, if there are parents in the audience, you should think about it because your student won't know about it. You're hearing about it, which is to find a way to get your internship into U.S. government. And they hire a lot of interns, usually junior and senior. And they don't have to be political science. They just have the criteria we try and look for. And I'll talk about just the Asian American different units, is to look at students, obviously good grades, but who are civil-minded, who do a lot of community work, and who are actually usually connected to some organizations. And this is the, I know in my class I talked about it, a networking exercise. And this is not a networking exercise for the student at the moment, because they're still in school. So for example, Leo, your parent while in school, they should be talking to organization who might be interested to sponsor people like you with a internship assignment, let's say in Department of Energy or something, right? Or even the units I was in, there was, I think 7 interns. Department of Commerce, MBDA, I have 6 interns. They all come out of Asian Americans advocacy organization. I can mention a couple of them because I was a member of OCA, which organization Chinese American, Asian American Advocates, the Leadership Foundations, and those organizations had good relations with the government where they could send some of the fellows into it. So as a parents, you want to figure out who these organizations are, and you need to get to know the organization. And usually what that really means though, and some of my students understand this when I say this, is you have to network and kind of work a deal with them. And the deal is very simple. You support the organization, they support you, right? And that could really mean sometimes donation to the nonprofit.
Yeah.
So you're part of the organization. They get to know you. They get to know your children, and have your children volunteer in the nonprofit. So they get to know his criteria, skill set, and they recommend them to these interns. And what's wonderful about being an intern in Washington is for college students, they learn about the environment, and they could make the decision where they want to work U.S. government. Some of them, oh yeah, I would love to come back. And when they come back, they have that on their resume. And some of them said, no, not for me. I'm heading to private sector, or I'm heading to nonprofit. I'm just not work. I'm going to invest my money somewhere, right? So they once they learn, and it's all about learning and knowing the people. And the message to the parents out, you need to start the networking if you want your kids to have opportunity, and your kid has to start networking if they want to be part of that selection.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
There's a lot of wonderful opportunity. You just have to know how to work your way to it.
We have another question in the chat from Key. They
Okay.
ask, as a federal employee, how would you find an overseas position working in a foreign country?
Actually, you know who they are, right? For example, the Department of State has commercial, not commercial, they have the representative that represent U.S. policy. So those are a premium job, right? There's a lot of state employee who will have to apply for it. Department of Commerce had commercial officer, like there's 5 in China. There's probably at least 1 or 2 in each country. Wow. So you think about those, and then you have to apply for it. And every 3 years, they open up. They select 100 in Department of Commerce, I know the process because I try to get into it. They would select about 100 of them through the application, and then they do some training. And out of the 100, they sort through maybe 30 of them, and then the 30 will actually get assigned to most likely not the country you want. Like if I said I want to go to Hong Kong, because I was born in Hong Kong, I said, won't that be great? And I speak the language. They will send me to Romania for 2 years. And if I do good, I might get to go to India. And then when the job opens in Hong Kong, I might apply for it. So it's not as simple as, hey, I want to go to a certain country. But in order to get out to the other country, you got to look for a job that has people in our country, besides the armed forces, right? So yeah. Department of State, Department of Agriculture actually have people around the world, right? But they're very few, very few.
Mm-hmm. So one last question on college students.
Yes.
What steps should college students, specifically as you mentioned, juniors and seniors, what steps should they take to get an internship with the federal government?
Well, figure out what you want to do first, right? Figure out what you want to do. You can actually apply for those internships on usajob.gov. But now you're competing with the rest of the world, the rest of the country. Those special internships that are set up by organizations, for example, I'll just use an example. You're from UCLA. There might be an organization in Los Angeles who have opportunity to bring some of the folks, their folks, to the federal government. So what happened is a organization negotiate with the agency. And when I was in the Department of Commerce, we work with OCA, and we take minimally 2 interns. So OCA has about 30 interns from across the country. So using the example, someone would talk to the OCA people locally and say, hey, my kids were interested. What do we have to do? And they give you some pointers. And usually what they say to you as a student is get involved in Asian American civic engagement so you can show that you care about the community and you have some skill set, and they will put you on the list. So for that is one example. And you could take different route, right? There's actually an application under the administration called Presidential Fellows. You could go apply for it, right? So it could be that simple or very complicated by having build a relationship to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. But now on the other end of the spectrum, right?
Okay.
Switching into the government from the private sector. What are some difficulties switching between careers in the private sector and the federal government? And if so, how do you overcome these difficulties?
Well, what I find, because I'm a corporate guy, then entrepreneur guy, and then nonprofit guy. Mm-hmm. I had to slow down when I get from entrepreneurship. I had to speed up when I went from corporate to entrepreneurship. I have to slow down when I get to nonprofit. I have to really, really slow down when I get to the federal government.
Yeah.
Because the pace is a steady pace, but it's frustrating for private sector folks to get in first. Until you learn the system. What regulation is there to protect you? What regulation is there to stop you?
Yeah.
And one thing that I learned in the private sector, they always look for change agents, right? And you hear that a lot in private sector. And some of the folks are, quite a few folks are in the private sector. They always look for change agents, people who can make something new, make the company better, and so on and so on. Mm. So in the government, most administrators, like we call them bureaucrats, right? Administrators, they don't want changes because they could potentially get in trouble. And George is one of those guys who created a lot of new programs but I want you to no end of trouble. Hey, George, we haven't done that before. Like I tell you one thing as simple as, and you know my history, so you know that I'm always doing Asian American advocacy. So our agency was almost 50 years old, and at age 47 at the agency, I proposed a simple concept of having an Asian American business forum on Asian Heritage Month at our headquarters, right? And my boss said, "Oh, we haven't done that before." I said, "How are you sure you can do this?" He said, "How many people can you bring?" I said, "The biggest room is 470. I can't fill that." Well, that didn't go so well because now you have 470 people coming into Department of Commerce. How do you handle those? So there's a lot of reason not to do it, but I had the backing of both the White House and my boss at the time, who happened to be Asian American. He said, "Hell yeah, we could do that." And we got what, 285 people in. We have 600 people signed up. So so that's a, imagine it, 47 years. That was the first time somebody tried to pull that off. Right. So I took a trade mission to China, 12 people. They said, "George, our agency don't do trade mission." I said, "Okay, call it business exchange then. I don't care. I'm just taking some minority business to China to see other businesses potential." So that took like 9 months to get approval. And then, yeah. So there are rules to protect us as the US government. There are rules to make sure that we fall in line with these rules. And they ask for people whose job is to watch it, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of those things happening. So you wanted something, being a change agent in the federal government is not the easiest thing. And it's not something I felt it's not something they look for, right? As opposed to the private sector. So it could be very frustrating. Could be very frustrating.
Pretty much because of the regulations and because they oppose change in general, you have to slow down a lot then when you switch from the private sector, and you have to really try to.
You have to slow down before you get in trouble. You can speed up once you figure a system out, right? Because once I figured a system out, I created 5 trade missions altogether in 10 years.
Yeah.
Actually won awards for it, right? Because nobody had dared to do it. And no, they were so shocked that we did it, and then get recognized by both the Commerce Secretary and even the White House, right? And all of a sudden, "Oh yeah, good job, George. Here's an award." I said, "Okay, why did you approve this earlier?" Right? So that kind of dynamics is there. And generally the reality is there in a lot of corporation until you figure what I call in my class unwritten rules, until you figure out how to, I call it making deals, so that you get people the opportunity to say, don't keep people up and say no, right? Because it's so compelling. And one of the things I learned is, you know, to give credit to people. And those are never my trade mission. It's always my boss' trade mission, right? So that's the kind of things you have to learn. And if you come in with an ego and say, "Hey, I want to create something for my own and make a name of myself," there are a lot of people to stop you. You want to create something for, in this case, the community, there are a lot of people to help you. So it's just a way of learning how to work within the context of the system and regulations, right? Like they're not supposed to get the pin, but somebody figure out, "Hey, we ordered the pin, everybody pay for it themselves." There's a pin, right? There's a proud unit that we all wear it, right?
So there's less flexibility and freedom working in the government than the private sector. But what are some reasons that someone would want to work for the federal government instead of the private sector?
Well, I think the impact. The impact of depending what job you have. I felt like if I can't get anything changes, if I work the highest level of the government to help Asian Americans, where can I do that? I mean, nowhere I could do that. Nowhere else I could do that, right? So it doesn't have to be just what I do. For example, if you are a health professional right? Think about Dr. Fauci, right? Think of somebody like that. What the impact is, right? If you work in the State Department, you could be affecting the policy of the U.S. government with a particular nation. Well, what private sector can do that? Private sector is there to make money.
Yeah.
That's all they care about. And you don't help the company make money, you're gone, right? It's that simple. Government services, it's really public service. So it cannot be for you. If you have mindset for you, then it doesn't work. And that's why I don't think every government service is for everybody. Don't do it for the money, right? The money is not there. You get a lot more bad pay in the private sector. Don't do it for the ego, because there's a way to get ego boost, because they're a bigger ego than you, most likely. And do that for the benefit if that's what you care. And a lot of people like to have to say the security, having good healthcare. And a lot of people work until they get their son, so they have the pension. I don't know how many company has pension now, right?
Yeah.
So benefit is great. And we do have a lot of federal holidays, a lot of sick days, and a lot of personal days. So this is a wonderful benefit as a quality of life kind of thing, right? So there's pros and cons. So it's not for everybody, but I think everybody should kind of take a look at the opportunity and see if it fits for them.
Yeah. So
hopefully that's a good answer for you.
You talk about pensions as opposed to the private sector.
Yeah.
And about how people can just work until they retire with these benefits.
Mhm.
So in general, how is job security while working for the federal government? And is it largely affected by change in administration?
Only if you're a political appointee. If you're a political appointee, a change of administration usually means new people in charge. If you're a career employee like myself, I work for, I went in under Bush, worked for Obama 8 years, and then Trump. I left in the middle of Trump's administration, free president. So career employee could work for the different administration. So administration changed it. Now there is some impact because every administration come in. The reason why they are in office usually is because they say, hey, I could do the better job than this one.
Yeah.
So what they generally try to do is do something totally different. Now some smart ones say, okay, if this works, we'll keep it. And they will only change the name, but keep the same program. So you as a federal government employee, really nothing changed except what you call it, what you're doing. So that's a good thing, right? Most of my programs get kept from Obama to Trump, and we just call it something different, right?
Yeah.
But that's not true in a lot of cases. A lot of cases say, hey, for example, there's some regulation that's in place that you work on, and Republicans generally say, hey, no more regulation. Businesses should be free to do what they do. So all those change.
Yeah.
So now you have to go, okay. But don't put it away too soon. Don't junk it. Put that document somewhere if you plan to stay 4 more years, because that document could be reused again. The next administration come back in, and you see the next administration come back in and do the similar things. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So we do have a few minutes left, so I'd like to open the floor to Q&A from the audience. We already have a question in the chat.
Yeah.
CG asks, is health insurance program provided for people retired from federal government?
Yes, I have the same health insurance, and now actually with Medicare, I'm double insurance, maybe too much.
So along with the pension, you are guaranteed health care for the rest of your life as well?
Yeah, you have to pay for it, right? Just like when you're an employee, you have to pay for it.
Yeah.
But what's beautiful about it is that there's no increase, at least not for, get the fingers crossed, like a private sector.
So yeah, we have a few minutes left. If anyone in the audience has any final questions for George, yeah, he's a very knowledgeable guest with unique knowledge on working for the U.S. government. Any last questions? How has your experience been working with MyT, George?
Kathy and I are good friends. I love the concept, and I really enjoy the coaching. I've done both one-on-one, and actually we have some small group coaching that we actually were thinking about doing a small group coaching on this federal government track, if there's enough interest. So if you're interested, you could do one-on-one coaching. I could tell you more about your particular case, or we could create something that is kind of small group coaching. Talk to Kathy.
Mm-hmm. And then another question from Li Lin. They ask if green card holders can work for the government.
Some special cases they can, usually through contractors.
Yeah, and then Yi Hong asks, what types of connections are critical in getting a government job?
Well, it helps if you know somebody in the hiring organization. And let's say you work for you want to work for Department of Education. If somehow you know enough people, so you just mention to them, hey, I applied for this job. Could you take a look at it? You're not going to get the job because you know people, but at least somebody will make sure that you are being revealed. So just like any other companies, those resumes go through USA Jobs. They go through to a HR person, and usually is in the hundreds, and they do some screening. Mm-hmm. And then a certain sector go to the HR people in the agency. They do some screening. By the time they get to the hiring manager, usually 10 or 12 resume out of the 200 or whatever. So you want to make sure you kind of go through these process. But a hiring manager could actually go and ask, hey, such and such resume in there. So just as like private sector, if there's enough people that you know, it doesn't guarantee you a job, but at least get you to be considered. That's the way to do it.
So another question from Key in the chat. Do you have to retire on the job to get a pension? Or do you get a pension as long as you earn enough credit?
Yeah, you have to get to, I think it's 5 years, then you earn the credits for it. And then you have to wait till you're 65, I believe. If you retire at 62, you get discount pension. So
work for 5 years in the federal government as well as retiring past 65 or older.
Yeah, or 62, you get a discount. Mm-hmm. Just like Social Security, right? You want to draw money out early, you lose quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. So we are almost done. If anyone has any last final questions before we switch it over. Sam Tao asks, why does a U.S. federal government job pay much less than the private sector? How do they attract top talent with this model?
Because they can. It's very simple. They think they could get the talent they need. And by the way, the taxpayer will be screaming if I as a business specialist make $180,000 a year, right? Because the budget goes haywire. Don't forget this tax dollars. So they have to figure it out. Top talent is based on your definition. Certainly, top talents, people who are excited, let's say data science. Would the top talent data science want to go to the US government? Or would the Silicon Valley folks willing to pay top dollar for the talent? So if you're about money, most likely get more money out of Silicon Valley, right? So.
Yeah.
Again, it's all about public service and about impact. Mm-hmm. Don't go to government. You want to make top dollar. That's my advice.
The impact, not the money.
Yeah, it's again, public service is just that. Look at the police. They don't make a whole lot of money.
Exactly.
The president, he doesn't make a whole lot of money, right? Compared to a CEO, mm-hmm. Right? It's the impact and what you want to get out of it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, so that will wrap it up. Thank you everyone here for your participation. As I mentioned at the beginning, this was not a traditional topic, as Chinese Americans are not typically involved in government opportunities. But as there are some
there's no reason why not, though. Right? If you're Americans, you're entitled to be part of getting a U.S. government job. If you want it, you should take a look at it. I think everybody should take a look at it.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities there, and George really has helped in getting more Asian Americans involved in the government, especially with our future generations. So that being said, I'd like to now switch it to MyT.Coach Kathy, who's going to mention some programs that the audience may be interested in, some which may even include George as a coach.
Thank you, George, as always, for your wonderful sharing. You're a wonderful coach, wonderful mentor. Leo, thanks for your hosting. Now let's switch to Chinese. 首先没有进 MyT WeChat Group 的，请加入 WeChat Group. MyT.Coach, can you put the MyT.Coach WeChat code on the screen? 所以我们每周二都有职场的讲座，然后呢，请大家加入 MyT.Coach， 我们有几十位 coaches 帮助你不同的问题，也有很多 articles， 我们有很多线上线下的活动，请大家积极参加。MyT.Coach, can you put on the screen? Thank you. 然后就像 George mentioned 的，我们 each individual coach has a private coaching program, right? We also have a group coaching program. 然后还有一个就是培训课，我们已经进入第9期了第9期大家都叫黄埔军校。这个MyT.Coach, can you put the Dong Kai's group coaching program? Okay, this is the东凯大家都认识哈，这是我们硅谷也是华人做的 C-suite， 他现在也是在帮我们做 coach， 他也帮助了很多华人怎么样进入 C-suite， 有怎么样显示你的 leadership。 这个 group coaching 的话通常是8个学生左右，这样的话大家也形成一个 network。 他这个课程的话是希望是 director 或者是 VP level 的，那如果是没有做到这个层次也想 engage 这个层次的朋友，请加入这个 group coaching， 一共是4个 session， 第一个 session 是9月15号开始。 Thank you. And how about the class 9? 那这个 class 的话很多人都已经比较熟悉了，因为已经开了几年了，在座的朋友同学很多都是这个毕业班出来的，我们都叫做黄埔军校。那现在第9期要开始了，那好多朋友就问说 OK，我有些课程没办法加入怎么办哈？这些不能参加的课程的话有这个 replay， 然后呢下一期课程的话也可以补课。但这里头最好的就是说你sign up 课程之后的话，马上加入我们的 VIP， 各种的闭门讨论，而且学员之间相互支持相互帮助，经常也会请 speakers 做这个 group 的讨论，这样的话大家抱团取暖。所以我们好多学员来自五湖四海，在平台上交了很多朋友，我们在线上线下也有很多活动，比如说上周我们在 San Diego 线下活动也是几十名学员加入，然后9月11号在硅谷，我们现在也将近40名朋友报名了参加线下的 networking。 我们每一次 networking 都会有这些 VIP 的 speakers to help，告诉我们华人怎么样在职场晋升，怎么样 be happy be healthy， 好吧，欢迎大家加入我们的第9期。第9期原来是9月份开始的，现在我们推到10月份了，欢迎大家参加。另外的话大家知道我们 create 了一个 fun fitness， 这个是每天都有的，我们在职场上一定要有 high energy， 一定要有一个 healthy body and healthy mind， be happy be healthy。那如果有朋友有兴趣加入我们 Happy Fun Fitness， 请加入这个群。这样的话我们每天下午4点半西部时间到6点，然后周末的话是早上西部时间8点到9点，所以欢迎大家加入 Be Happy Be Healthy。 OK， 下周2的讲座我们现在改为下周5，是一个著名的 华人 COO， 他会跟大家讲作为一个华人他是怎么样进入职场的 C-suite， 所以欢迎大家参加。好吧，大家还有什么问题吗？谢谢大家加入哈。那这个就是下周五的讲座，我们从周二 move 到周五晚上，我们平常都是周二。谢谢大家，也欢迎大家推荐 speakers， 然后也欢迎大家毛遂自荐。我们自从 pandemic 以来，一直都有在做职场讲座，帮助更多的华人进入，不但是进入管理层，进入高层，最重要的是 be happy， 怎么样管理各方面的conflict 啊，怎么样管理上下级关系啊，怎么样高效沟通啊？好吧，谢谢大家，谢谢大家。Good night. We will